Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a literal 1983 storage revolution, the IBM PC/XT. We're going to explore a truly pivotal moment in hardware history. And the coolest part, we're telling this entire story just by looking at the metadata of one single, incredibly revolutionary machine. So let's just dive right in and look at this staggering price tag, $4,995. Seriously, take a second to think about that. When we look at historical tech, we always have to ask, what exactly did that massive chunk of cash actually buy you back in the Wild West of early computing? I mean, this wasn't just pocket change, right? For a small business or maybe a super dedicated enthusiast, dropping $5,000 was basically like buying a decent car. And here is the kicker. For nearly $5,000, you were getting a grand total of 10 megabytes of storage. Just 10. I know, it's wild. Today, that wouldn't even hold a single high-res photo on your smartphone. But back then, having 10 megabytes of dedicated space just sitting right there on your desk, it felt like an absolute ocean of digital real estate. It literally meant freedom from having to constantly swap out floppy disks just to run a basic program or save a document. To really grasp the sheer gravity of those numbers, we kind of have to ground ourselves in the year 1983. Personal computing was just starting to shift out of hobbyist garages and onto actual corporate desks. And physical storage, that was one of the absolute biggest bottlenecks to progress. You could have the fastest processor on the market, but, if you didn't have anywhere to reliably put your data, the whole system would just grind to a halt. Which brings us to Section 1. Enter the IBM PC/XT. The museum's text actually gives us this brilliantly simple definition. They call the PC/XT essentially an IBM PC with a hard disk. And honestly, that's it. It wasn't some top-to-bottom reinvention. It was just the highly strategic and, as we saw, incredibly expensive addition of a hard disk to an existing foundation. But man, it sparked a massive evolutionary step. IBM realized, hey, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We just need to give it a way bigger trunk. Now, this specific physical machine is immortalized in the museum's catalog under object ID 500004512. Sure, it might just look like a random string of digits to us, but that number preserves a critical hardware milestone. It ensures we have a permanent physical record of the actual origins of our modern digital world. And the museum's database keywords, they perfectly capture the vibe of this 1983 beast. We've got personal computer, magnetic disk, mechanical, and electronics. Seeing the word mechanical slapped right next to electronics is such a fantastic reminder. Early storage wasn't just silent, invisible silicon. It was deeply mechanical. It was whirring, physically spinning metal. You could literally hear your computer working as those read-write heads physically scanned back and forth across the magnetic platters inside. Placing this machine inside the broader Memory and Storage Magnetic Core Memory exhibition really highlights its critical role. It sits directly in this amazing historical continuum, perfectly bridging the gap between those old, room-sized magnetic core memory systems and the completely silent, massive, terabyte drives that we all rely on today without even a second thought. Moving on to Section 2, the 10-megabyte Seagate ST-412. The historical text explicitly calls out the hardware hero responsible for all this storage, the Seagate ST-412 hard disk drive. They didn't just throw some generic drive into the casing. The museum notes that this was a highly popular, definitive drive for this exact moment in computing history. Seagate was cementing its reputation right then and there, doing all the heavy lifting for IBM's new flagship machine. When you compare the base IBM PC to this XT model side by side, the sole defining difference, the only thing that commanded that crazy $5,000 premium, was simply the inclusion of this specific Seagate disk. That one single component completely transformed the capability, the weight, and obviously the cost of the machine. It turned a pretty basic computing tool into a serious powerhouse that could suddenly manage databases and run much larger applications. And that leads us to Section 3, becoming the standard. This brings us to the absolute core of why this matters so much. As the text states, this was a drive whose interface became a standard. The Seagate ST-412 didn't just hold data, its very interface, the actual way it physically and electronically communicated with a computer, established a universal standard. It effectively wrangled the chaos of early hardware compatibility for years to come. Because of the specific interface, other manufacturers could finally start building components that were actually guaranteed to work together, which just totally accelerated the entire industry. It's honestly incredible to see how one single detail, preserved courtesy of the IBM corporate archive and held securely by the Computer History Museum, reveals the whole genesis of standardized computing. It is such a powerful reminder that our completely seamless, plug-and-play world today that was hard-won by early standard setters like the PC/XT. We completely take for granted that our devices just effortlessly talk to each other now, but that foundational language was written right here.
As we wrap up this explainer, there's a thought I want to leave you with. The museum's copyright on this specific record extends out to the year 2026, which kind of makes you wonder, what incredibly expensive standard-setting technology from our modern era is going to seem just as quaint, yet utterly vital, in the tech museums of tomorrow? Seriously, what is our $5,000 10-megabyte equivalent today? Thanks so much for exploring this remarkable piece of hardware history with me.